Welcome to episode 1 of the Georgian Surrogacy Podcast. My name is Liz Tripodi and I'd like to welcome with me Anita Fiorenza.
Hi everybody.
We are so happy to have you with us from wherever you are listening around the world, and this podcast is going to be about our journey doing surrogacy in Tbilisi, Georgia, which is a country in Eastern Europe, not America. And we're going to give you lots of information over different episodes about our own personal surrogacy journeys, information about clinics, information about Tbilisi, shopping, getting out of the country, where to eat.
Yes, so while Liz might be the one that is super serious, I'm going to be chiming in with all of the fun facts that Liz and I got up to while in Georgia.
So it's been now coming up to 2 years that our girls were born in Tbilisi. Our situation, both Anita and I, was a little bit unusual to most surrogacy journeys because we were in the middle of COVID when our girls were born. So I guess the first place to start in this episode is we're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves and then a little bit about how we met. So I am now 45 years old, and my husband and I tried for 13 years to have a family by lots of different fertility treatments, both in Australia and overseas, and nothing worked. And we knew that our last option was going to be surrogacy, but it's quite a scary thing if you haven't or you don't know anybody. And certainly 4 years ago when we signed contracts to do surrogacy in Georgia, there was very few people in Australia that had been to Georgia, and there was nobody that I knew that had gone through surrogacy. It's one of those topics that is a little bit taboo, don't you agree, Anita?
Yes, I think we get all kinds of questions, even now. When we still mention our little ones were born overseas, people stop us and say, I think you can have a money jar next to you and have a bet about what questions they're going to ask first.
And I think one of the most important things is, by us doing this podcast also, is we want to bring awareness to the world of surrogacy, but also awareness of surrogacy in Georgia, because it is such a beautiful country, beautiful people, fantastic medical care. We had the most amazing doctors, which we'll get to in future episodes, and how our journeys intertwined. But I did lots of research. I looked at every single country that was, possible. And obviously before we'd gotten to this stage, we'd also looked at adoption, we'd looked at fostering, we'd looked at every possible situation. And we looked at the Ukraine, and obviously now, sadly, the Ukraine surrogacy is no longer available due to the terrible war that's happening there. And then I stumbled upon Georgia. And Georgia looked like it was very similar country to Greece, which is somewhere where my husband and I have travelled a lot to. In the city of Tbilisi, I had a few friends that had been there before and said what a beautiful city it was. So I made a few inquiries. I contacted pretty much every clinic that I could find myself on the internet and set up Skype calls. Again, at this stage, I didn't know anybody that had gone to Georgia, and certainly nobody that had signed with them. I had a couple of meetings with a lawyer and another company, but again, they had no one that had done surrogacy in Georgia. So my husband and I decided to go and visit Tbilisi during one of our European trips. And I remember our flight landed at around 4 o'clock in the morning, and we got picked up by the driver from the agency that we decided to use. And we got driven to the maternity hospital, and it was completely closed and completely dark, and we got dropped off and walked down this little corridor where the guest accommodation was. And my husband and I are looking at each other and thinking, what are we doing here? It was like going into almost like a haunted house, and we were so tired and just, we couldn't believe we'd travelled across the world to, number one, look at the possibility of surrogacy, but here we are in a strange country that we didn't know anything about. We went to sleep. We got woken up in the morning at about 8:30 by a couple of ladies bringing us breakfast, and then about 15 minutes later the coordinator knocked on the door and, welcomed us with open arms, and we did a tour of the facilities, and I just burst into tears. I remember taking my husband's hand and just saying, I don't know if we're doing the right thing. I was just so overwhelmed by everything that we had already gone through in our journey, but so overwhelmed with what the possibility could be. Was this going to be the chance for us to be parents, or were we again looking down the barrel of just empty hopes and promises? We met with the doctors, and one of the key things that my husband still remembers to this day is one of the doctors said to us, "I promise you that you will get your baby." Now, they're pretty big words. We'd never been promised anything ever.
That's Dr. Keddy?
Yeah, that was Dr. Keddy, the wonderful Dr. Keddy, who we both have so much respect for. And so we decided to sign. We went through the legals with the lawyers there, and but prior to this, the day before, while we went back into our room, and I said to my husband, "You know what? We were both so overwhelmed. Let's just go to a shopping centre and ground ourselves, because it doesn't matter what city you're in around the world. I find that if you go to a big shopping mall, you sort of become a bit more grounded by your facilities, because everything sort of feels a little bit more familiar." So we took a cab out to Tbilisi Mall, and we walked around the shops and things like that, and we chatted, and we had a chance a little bit more to get back to normality. Then after a couple of days, we actually checked into a hotel, and again, was going through the process of the biggest decision of our lives. And so we signed, and we left Tbilisi, I think, for the first time with a little bit of hope. And that was in July of 2019. And yeah.
And I think when you got back, we met shortly after that on social media.
We did.
Yeah.
So Anita and I were both members of various social media platforms.
Yeah.
And by chance, I think, from memory, I responded to a question of yours.
It was on the Australian surrogacy page. You picked me up from there because I posted a question asking about, was it just overseas?
I think so.
Surrogacy options.
Look, up until this time, I mean, now it's a lot more common, but certainly on most of the Australian pages, going overseas back then wasn't recommended, and it wasn't encouraged.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to see now that it has become a lot more supported.
Yes.
So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your journey?
Okay, so look, my memory is foggy because when you become a mum, everything goes foggy. But I'll try and match Liz's great story.
Wasn't that great?
So where Liz and I connected was on that post, and basically I asked a question, and Liz seemed to be so enthusiastic, and I just seemed to connect with Liz. And I had at that stage been speaking to a few other people. I found a lady known as Genevieve. She's does egg donations. I'd done a video chat with her, and she'd spoken to me quite thoroughly about all different places I could go, and I had been researching in the US about guaranteed programs. So she had compared guaranteed programs with me in Greece, Ukraine, and Georgia.
And for those that may not be familiar with some of the terms that we might use during this podcast, a guaranteed program is exactly what it sounds like. They are guaranteeing you a baby. Now, every country and every clinic or agency have different rules about what's included in a guarantee. So if you are researching surrogacy for the first time, do look over everything and do see that if a guarantee package is right for you or it isn't. For example, in my case, we chose not to go with a guarantee package because we just couldn't afford it after spending so much money already on surrogacy.
Yeah, so for me, I absolutely wasn't going to chance surrogacy without a guarantee. I had already tried surrogacy back, it could have been 2014. We had gone through Asia and we had been burned. I had used all of my embryos and they had been transferred across and I'd lost them all. So going back now to where I started and met Liz. So I ended up in Georgia and I needed a donor egg, and this third party company was going to guarantee me a donor egg. We talked about the best places to go, and it ended up being Chichaba, which ended up being in Georgia. So I needed to get there and I needed a guaranteed program. Going across, I really hadn't looked at all the different companies in Georgia like Liz had. But Liz was a great source of information for me.
I think I'd done most of the research for both of us.
I did later on contact some of the agencies just to double check, but I had been put straight through to my coordinator at Chichaba, and I did also wait and speak to people in Greece, and it just came down to the package that I was being offered, the terms and conditions. We left USA way behind. We weren't interested. When we looked at the packages, there was a lot of insurance costs and money to the agency, and we found that for the money we were paying, we were getting a lot on our side, like, they were covering the food for the time we would be there. They were covering accommodation. They were covering a lot of things that we couldn't see where the value for money was going if we were going to the USA. So going forward, I connected with my coordinator, and I could see that Liz was probably going through at the same time as me, and I think our friendship was developing online, and she had already been there, so she'd been in, you said July it was?
Yeah.
So it was around August 2019, is that right? Yeah, August 2019, and we signed as well. We were right behind you. August 2019, we signed our contract. And I was keeping up with Liz pretty much.
So you visited there, what was it, October, November? Is that when it was?
We had planned to actually go in not until March, but we brought our trip forward to Christmas, so December, January, on that New Year's Christmas period. I got a break from work unexpectedly, and I brought all the flights forward, and we had signed everything from Australia. We had transferred all the money, which was quite daunting because we didn't intend on doing everything. A lot of people...
And I remember reassuring you that everything's fine, don't want you to worry.
Yeah.
And because by that stage we were ready to go very close for our first transfer.
Yes, and I think it made it a bit easier knowing Liz had gone there, Liz had done it, and I had Liz in my pocket. Whereas some people wouldn't transfer 2 lots of payments ready to do a transfer without going there and signing at that early stage, because Georgia really wasn't on the map
No,
then.
it still
they
wasn't.
weren't.
It wasn't on the map at all. Still.
And Georgia was pretty much an unknown country for surrogacy.
And I think I certainly got a lot of pushback. Why are you going to Russia? And look, Georgia is not Russia, and I think it's very clear to make the difference that Georgia is independent country. Yes, it might be bordering on Russia, but it's bordering on other countries as well.
Yeah.
And certainly, yes, a lot of Russians have gone to live in Georgia, but the Georgian people are very proud of their heritage. And,
I think my husband seemed to be quite confident as well about the location, whereas I was more about the research side of how we're going to do this, what we're going to do, and I had forward planned everything. He was more about the geography of it until we got there. So, but I do understand what you say, because until we got there and got on that plane and went and did that transfer, the feeling of arriving in a country and into that maternity hospital and the hotel, and it's surreal. It is absolutely life-changing.
And it's very different for us Australians as well. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. I remember, it is such a long flight, such a long way for us to get anywhere from Australia, and people that are already in Europe and are looking to do surrogacy, it is so much easier for them to hop on a flight and go across those 2 or 3 hours to Tbilisi. For us, anyone in Australia, it is something that has to be planned so far in advance. And of course, and we'll get to this in future episodes, our babies were due in the middle of a pandemic where our government had flights banned in and out of our country. So...
But we didn't know that.
No, of course not.
Because when we went, everything was normal. Everything was absolutely normal, and COVID hadn't even become a thing.
No.
Yeah.
And we are very fortunate. I think it was... So, if we want to just fast forward just a fraction, our transfer went through first. So we transferred 2 embryos, 2 very good quality embryos. And we're going to talk in future episodes about how they find a surrogate and communication and all that sort of stuff. But our first transfer sadly failed. And that was at the end of January 2020. And Anita had her transfer, and they were successful on first go.
Yes, which left me in 2 places. I was obviously ecstatic because,
But you were so disappointed. I remember you were so disappointed.
I didn't know what to say to Liz, because how could I be going forward? Because we were working together through the whole thing. And
we used to joke, imagine if we end up being there at the same time, and imagine if our babies are born at the same time. Well, it was meant to be, because our girls were born 3 weeks apart. We both ended up there at the same time.
But for a while there, I thought I was going on my own.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I did. And
our second, so Anita, of course, I was absolutely thrilled.
And we hadn't met at this stage. Physically, we had never met.
And the ironic thing about our friendship and about what a small world it is we live 15 minutes away from each other.
Yes.
And it turns out that I sang at your husband's sister's wedding.
Yes.
And so, paths had crossed. You were customers at where my husband works. It was just a strange set of circumstances.
Yes, that's right. We found that out later, though.
Yes, much later.
Towards the end, just before our little ones were born, and we were all over there together. People started putting the names together because of social media.
So our second transfer then happened at the start of March 2020, and end of very, very late Feb 2020. And again, we transferred 2. It was pretty much our final go because we only had 4 embryos, and miraculously, both those 2 embryos took. It was very, very high HCG readings from the start. So after 7 days, there was a positive. And my husband and I would joke, imagine if it's twins, Now, when we got confirmation from Dr. Ketty that it was a positive, we were just over the moon. A few days later, and of course Anita was one of the very first that I told, and I think you said, "Oh, imagine if you're having twins," or we all used to joke about it.
Yeah.
Because Anita was hoping to have twins.
I did, yeah. We originally transferred to try and get twins.
Yeah. And so my husband and I didn't, you know, we'd come 13 years and we had never, ever thought that, you know, we would have just been happy just to have one, and just even to get a positive on a pregnancy test for us would have been enough. And so Dr. Ketty comes back to us a few days later and said, "Oh, by the way, there's 2 in there." I remember one night, I found out it was 10 o'clock at night because Georgia used to always sort of text or, you know, call around that time, and my husband was asleep in bed. I remember going up the stairs, I was holding the phone, I had the video on, and I walked in and I said, "Babe," and he's like, "Ugh." And I said, "Dr. Ketty just rang." He goes, "Ugh." I said, "We're having twins." Well, his body literally jumped out of the bed. It was like one of those things you see in a movie. And I said, "Okay, good night." And I walked out and closed the door, and I still have that video. And yeah. And, you know, I'll get into in later episodes about the risks and, you know, what happens with twins during surrogacy and different things that happened to us. But I will say, you know, from the onset, Anita and I, number one, are so lucky that we have found this friendship that is going to last the rest of our lives. And under very unusual circumstances, you know, people come into your life for a reason. But it turns out we have more in common than just the fact that we went through surrogacy journeys as women. We are both from European backgrounds. We are both extremely family orientated. We're both very compassionate people. We both are very driven. I'd like to say we're both very caring. Guess it depends on what day of the week it is. No. We're both very headstrong. We're both stubborn. And I can say now there's nothing that I wouldn't do for this woman.
Oh. Ditto.
So that wraps up the first episode of the Georgian Surrogacy Podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you soon.
Ciao.